It's June 24th, 2024. I'm with John Jeckovich. We're reading his book, Their Mother's Son. We're on chapter 3. That chapter is entitled, You're in the Army, on page 445. He just got off a troop train, and they were happy that they weren't going to California, which would mean they were going to fight in the Pacific. That never took place. So they ended up in Evansville, Indiana, so they're all happy about this. So here we go. As the truck carried us all, the sail riding, and onto a highway, we got a glimpse of a sign stating Evansville, Indiana, was 6 miles east. This was made our morning, and it stated in concrete terms our fondest hope. We were on the East Coast, or reasonably so. We rode in the trucks for several hours, always heading southwest. We had 1/2 hour break on the side of the road. At that time, K rations and hot coffee were made available.
And a road, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, see.
After the 4th hour of driving, we're approaching an army camp there with the familiar sign, restricted area. Signs profusely about the proverbial barbed wire fence had sprouted up its ugly head again. Sure enough, in a few short minutes, we pulled into the main camp entrance. Besides the barricade entrance was a large sign in blue and gold, Camp Breckenridge, home of the 75th Infantry Division.
Breckenridge. 75th, double nickel, the double nickel.
Yeah.
The double nickel.
Camp Breckenridge was in the northeast quadrant of the state of Kentucky and was bordered by 4 states: Indiana to the north, West Virginia to the east, Tennessee and Illinois on the west. The camp itself was located 1 mile east of Morganfield in Union County. Breckenridge was a large camp of about 3,600 acres and was activated during World War II as an infantry training center, accompanying over 40,000 men. During the war, it was a large encampment for German and Italian prisoners of war, PW, who worked on the nearby farms and canneries. The post closed at the end of the war, but was reactivating during the Korean War. It was reverted to an inactive status January 1, 1954. Since then, it has been used as a summer training ground for 45,000 reserves and National Guard troops. It appeared that we had, or should say, I had come full circle. Camp Upton, Fort Sam Houston, Camp Bullis, Camp Swift, Fort Hood, and now Camp Breckenridge. Boy, you've been to a hell of a lot of camps.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Strangely enough, and rather climatic, it was only 300 or so miles from home. I could drive home in 6 hours. So now you went full circle, and you're only 300 miles from Niagara Falls. Isn't that something? Isn't that something?
Yeah, but a month later I was overseas.
Yeah, but look at all the camps you're at. What I perceived in his various sundry moves was a pattern emerging, sprinkled with some luck and smattering of bureaucratic blundering. Surely enough, I was destined for Lackland. How would I progress there? That would be an unknown factor. I would like to have made the attempt for no other reason than to prove myself and others that I had a capability to succeed in a difficult task. After an opportunity was taken away from me, it was only a matter of being at the right place at the wrong time. The move to Fort Sam Houston was calculated upon the premise that combat military detachment would be formed. After that concept, for whatever reason, it was disbanded. It was only a question of logistics, where to put X number of bodies in a hurry. They moved to Billis and Hood, were the only stopgap maneuvers that consolidate and contemplate their next move. The move to Camp Swift was decidedly different, Hugh. There a prophet of luck entered the picture. Swift was, from the Army's point of view, afford the ideal place to situate me permanently. The contents of the 106th Infantry Division was made up of people just like me. Air Corps, ASTP, unattached units, and solidarity.
Their ass kicked.
Yeah, individuals.
Yeah.
That was
Put
106th.
all those smart guys in there.
106th Infantry. They took a major toll on Bottle of Balls. They lost a large percentage of the young men that were killed.
And all those young guys got killed.
Many like me who were then left in that situation to go overseas and either got killed or wounded in this unit. There were only several hundred of us in my situation. The reason why I moved out can only be explained in a hypothetical fashion. Either I was removed from the unit because I lacked fundamentals to get through the basic training, or a more applicable solution arose, namely Camp Breckenridge. Breckenridge was very similar. Camp Breckenridge was very similar to Swift, with only the difference that Swift did not have the time element. They were preparing to go overseas in several months. I hope Breckenridge afforded more time, although this proved not to be the case. Consequently, the 106th and the 75th Division Infantries were overseas within a month of each other. With each more bizarre, they were committed to the battle approximately the same time. While the losses at the 106th were so much greater than the 75th, can be only explained by the severity in which they engaged the enemy, but more on the subject later. As the trucks approached the headquarters, the sound of military band can be heard. Sure enough, they were performing for our benefit, and I was emotionally moved by this expression. Instead of being the only new replacements were merged into a larger group, or perhaps several thousand troops. We were formed into some kind of formation, and we ushered into the post theater for a briefing and orientation. The 75th Division was our outfit, and we were eventually to go overseas with it. We were then cordially and sincerely welcomed into our new assignment. What followed was a processing and informational procedure. We were told that our specific duties would be where they were to be located. It was assigned to Company H, 291st Regiment, 2nd Battalion. As we waited for the trucks to carry us to the new location, I noticed there were hundreds of men going to the same company as I was. They were all formerly ASTP and unattached. I thought of the 106th at Camp Swift and wondered if fate had finally caught up with me. I was destined to once again to be thrown into a makeshift outfit and ultimately venture overseas with them. The camp had all the characteristics of the previous installations they had been in. Again, it was a typical Army camp, but what made it unique was there was only 300 miles from home and in the same time zone. Coming into the company area, we were told to leave our equipment beside the road and go into the mess hall for noon chow. Inside the mess hall there were perhaps only 50 men, so seating was not a problem. All the men were so very congenial and wanted to know all about us. Where we were from, what outfits we were previously in, how we liked our new surroundings. They were recently inducted into the Army with probably at most 6 to 8 months active service. The non-coms had several years of service, and there were several different Army with many years of experience. What I saw of the officers was that they're all young men, mostly in their late 20s, and all seemed friendly and informal. After chow, we formed up beside our equipment and were told our barracks assignment. As we were in our platoon and squad, I was in the first platoon, second squad. So there was I billeted downstairs close to the front entrance of the barracks. The rest of the first day, we occupied readjustment and grooming. We considered this firstly and were completely re-outfitted with proper clothes. Everything we ever issued was turned in for clothes and shoes that fit us exactly. It was a relief to get rid of the oversized shoes and the all ill-fitting clothes we had initially issued at Upton. Next, we're taken to the barber shop for regulation 75th Division haircut, which was not too eccentric. Our next stop was an introductory meeting with our officers and non-coms. Our company commander was Captain Goodnight, a former halfback from Texas A&M. He was a medium built with a large neck and tremendous forearms. After he gave us a little talk, one felt that he was the man that you could feel comfortable with and going into combat with. And he would look out after you to the best of his ability and resources. I knew everyone in the room took to him immediately. He was direct, honest, forthright, and sincere. What else could you want from a combat leader? The executive officer was First Lieutenant Cummings, was a different story. He gave me the impression that he was talking down to us, and if there was more important things to do, to talk to a bunch of recruits and replacements. He gave the standard officer to enlisted man speech, respect, strict obedience to orders, and mostly military courtesy at all times. We found out later that he was a West Point graduate. We understood more of where he was coming from. My platoon leader was Second Lieutenant Conti, was a draftee, and most of us were product of Lower East Side in New York City. Having taken ROTC while in college, studying for an engineering degree, he was drafted into the Army, his third year. He was savvy, no-nonsense type of officer. The other officers who led the other three platoons were all the same caliber, and they offered different and various personalities and egocentricities. They were all former ROTC and in their third or last year of college, and all drafted into the service within the last year or so. The non-coms were much more mixed and varied assortment coming, naturally from different walks of life. There was First Sergeant Whalen, a big but not robust, tall, red-faced Irishman from the Bronx. He looked a typical New Yorker and walked with a decided limp, which made some of us curious to see how he got into the service. He was the most typical soldier of all, with possible exception of Tech Sergeant Rubert, my platoon sergeant. First,
That was the old guy.
That was the old guy?
Robert, yeah.
Huh.
yes. Wait a minute, that's all right.
15.
Okay, that was First Sergeant Whalen and Tech Sergeant Rubert, my platoon sergeant.
What was what was Rupert like, John?
Huh?
What was Rupert like? What was Rupert like?
He's an older guy, ex-regular Army.
Yeah?
He was a tech sergeant, platoon sergeant.
How old was he?
I was about 65.
Oh, okay.
How he,
And basically he got out.
Yeah.
how he attained a first sergeant in an infantry company was much to his credit, too well as a tenacious personality. Tech Sergeant Rubert was a regular Army, and I believe he served in the First World War.
Yeah.
So if he served in the World War, he's up there in years.
Yeah, he was old. Yeah.
He was
He didn't
exceedingly,
go over. They killed him out before we left.
he was exceedingly close to retirement, and somehow managed to obtain a waiver to stay in for the duration. So he didn't want to leave. Rupert didn't want to leave the Army. He wanted to stay in.
Well, but he knew they would put him overseas. He didn't go over. When we started going overseas, they cut him out.
He was a slender build, and I do not believe he weighed over 100 pounds.
What?
He said Rupert didn't weigh over 100 pounds,
No,
soaking wet,
He wouldn't make it overseas.
but gave all the indications of tough old bird who could take anything the Army dished out. He did not wear his uniform in a strict sense of the word. Rather, he wore it in an unmilitary-like fashion. How do you wear your uniform and not in a military fashion? You said Rupert didn't wear his uniform properly.
He did?
That's what you said in your book.
Yeah, he was independent. He knew he was getting out. The Army was getting rid of him.
Staff Sergeant Flood was our section leader, and I believe a regular Army. He was complete embodiment what a platoon sergeant should be, well-mannered, disciplined, and versed in his duties. Although he is somewhat subdued in his approach, we knew he meant business. Buck Sergeant Baker was my squad leader.
Yeah, Southerner.
Buck Sergeant Baker was my
Virginia.
squad leader and all the officers in the non-coms. I liked him the least. He was from Alabama,
Yeah.
and he talked to her, was a mouthful of, when he talked, it was like a mouthful of
You
cotton.
couldn't understand him.
A mouthful of cotton. He did not instill any sense of leadership in me or the rest of the squad. He was unsure of his job and relied mostly on his rank and authority, not on any true leadership ability to convey directives to us. Although he took his job very seriously, he did not achieve that sense of rapport with the men in his squad. We suffered the disastrous results because of it. The enlisted men, just as varied and diversified as the officers and non-coms, and were all draftees, but mostly the enlisted men were just varied and diversified in all officers and non-coms. They were draftees, but most from the select group, and the Army determined that they had certain qualifications from norm, much as they were the case of the 106th Infantry. Firstly, I must mention that H Company was Heavy Weapons Company. This meant our table of organization, TO, was such that we equipped with 30 caliber
Air-cooled.
30 caliber water-cooled machine guns and 81 millimeter mortars, as opposed to air-cooled light machine guns and 60 millimeter mortars. Standard in the rifle company, usually a section, 2 squads would support a rifle company with 81 millimeter mortars or heavy machine guns. PFC Fink was the gunner of the squad, had joined the division while out on maneuvers in Louisiana. Previously to be stationed at Breckenridge, he had come out of an ASTP program with 2 years of college before he was drafted. He wanted to be a school teacher, and his plans put on hold during the duration. Fink was a likable fellow who always had a cheerful, optimistic outlook on all tribulations.
Yeah, he got killed.
Yeah. PFC Goki,
Yeah, that's the guy who went to hospital.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
an assistant gunner,
We picked him up in Germany. We picked him up in Germany. Worst case for that guy to come in. He was the news to everybody.
yeah.
Goki, yeah. He thought he was getting out of the army.
PFC Goki was the assistant gunner was something else. Although he transferred from ASTP, he gave you the impression he had a profound IQ, but was not pretentious about it. He was constantly griping about everything, most of the Army, which he hated with a passion. He liked many things. He liked many things in the company. Was from somewhere in a lower New York, and he spoke with a distinct accent. Private Varilla, also from New York, was from a non-intense unit and did not have much time in the Army.
Yeah,
He was-
yeah.
He was somewhat apathetic, but would listen to instructions, even though he had no great desire to succeed in the Army. Private Spasta, also from New York, from an unattached unit, was a product of the East Side. He was the most undisciplined member in our squad. He had no conception of authority. It was only his manipulative and unscrupulous behavior that kept him from a stay in the guardhouse. The other members of the squad were new arrivals, like myself, therefore had to start from the bottom of a line of progression. Eventually they would reach a level of achievement through hard work and perseverance. There was also Private Graham from another squad, an ex-policeman from Manhattan, who everyone thought was too old and being ground combat unit. He was the oldest member of the platoon outside Sergeant Rupert, had a difficult time in keeping up the pace with the company. Private Smith, also from another squad, was from South Carolina and adamant about the injustices in the U.S. Army. He was drafted several weeks before he was to be married and was completely preoccupied with his fiance's
Yeah, he was
welfare
pissing all the time. He was pissing all the time.
and faithfulness to him when he was stationed in the Army.
No, he got killed anyway.
Oh boy. He had moved her to a nearby town in Evansville and was looking forward with great anticipation to his first 3-day pass. Private Gaffney, also from New York, was a little older than the general group, but did not display maturity in any constructive manner. He and Spots struck up a mutual admiration pact and were inseparable from that moment on. I trailed somewhere at the tail end of the group, and my hope was for sustaining any reasonable state of lasting friendship was to look beyond our group and into other squads that make up my platoon. On our first day began at Reveille, 5:30 hours, in which we fell out in formation besides our barracks on the company street. There was also a brief roll call, with everyone had to be accounted for. Breakfast followed shortly thereafter, in which Sergeant Rowe, the mess sergeant, usually afforded an excellent meal. I thought Sergeant Rowe was the best first-rate fellow, having served under him.
You know, when we went overseas, we was giving that stuff out to the English, remember?
Oh yeah, that was good.
10 ounces, 10 pounds of cans of soup
Yeah.
and everything, yeah.
Let me see what she wants. How you doing, Amber? Just reading the book on film to my dad. You can let it run. That's pretty good. Where are you at now? All right, call me in a little bit. I'm in the middle of this chapter. Love you.
5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, he was giving food out to the English.
That was good.
10
I-
10 ounce cans of orange, 10-ounce cans of fruit cocktail, orange, everything had to be in a can, 10-ounce
Number
can.
10 can, right?
Yeah.
Breakfast followed shortly thereafter, which Staff Sergeant Rowe, the mess sergeant, usually afforded an excellent meal. I thought Sergeant Rowe was a first-rate fellow. He served under him while doing KP several times at Breckenridge.
And what?
You said you served several times doing KP under him in
Yeah,
Breckenridge. You said you worked with him at Breckenridge doing KP duty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually after breakfast, we would have a short formation in front of the barracks. At this time, we're told what uniform the day was to be and generally what would encompass on the schedule for the day. This day would start off as a march to the supply room to draw individual TOE weapon. Since I was an ammo bearer, I would draw a carbine. Gunners with assistant gunners drew 45 pistols, and they carried the receiver tripod of the machine gun. Squad leaders drew M1 rifles, as did the section leaders and platoon sergeant. Platoon leaders carried carbines, along with a map case, binoculars, compass, and many minor spare parts for the field radios. After the weapons draw, we marched to a shaded area to hear the lecture by Lieutenant Conti on the function of heavy weapons company, which is in essence to give the support to the rifle company. As I was listening to the lecture, I reverted to my old habit of looking at everyone and putting them into categories. Somewhat as I did back in school, although there were many A students in the group, mostly ASTP or Air Corps, there was a goodly share of below average students. Whether the A students would make good combat soldiers remained to be seen. As far as I was concerned, that was something in the distant future. My main concern at this time was to link up with one or more fellow soldiers and to cultivate a friendship or at least working, talking relationship. This was difficult for me to do, as I do not have the social skills to manage such an undertaking. I did not make friends easily, and it was too critical to let some of my natural barriers down. What I did find out in my short stay in the Army was I tended to be more open and not so critical of myself, of my social setting. In
1 minute, 47 seconds.
the Army, everyone was practically in the same environment. As such, there was no social barriers in civil life. As I looked about me, I came to the realization that the selection of my friends would have to occur as a natural course of events, and I could not force it to try to make it happen. I then dismissed from it my mind and once again listened to what Lieutenant Conti was saying and was concluding his remarks. Time?
1 minute.
I had gotten the important aspects of his talk, but did not put much credence in it for the simple reason Lieutenant Conti, even though an officer, did not have any more experience in actual combat than we did. You can absorb a field manual, you know it thoroughly, but it's not the same as the actual experience.
45 seconds.
And the lecture was a march back to our old barracks and await chow at 1200 hours. I usually washed before eating, if it was possible, and just sat around for a few minutes before going into the mess hall, which was open from 11:30 to 12:30 hours.
20 seconds.
Spotston and Gaffney were holding everyone's attention as they were recounting about the girls that they had met and dated. None of us really believed much of what they said or the experience that they related.
Wow. that we're gonna end?
I don't know.